Hi! Welcome to this part of my guide and review featuring the Mythic Game Master Emulator, 2nd edition. If you haven't seen the other parts of my guide and review, please check out the playlist in the description below. This time we are going to talk about twists and turns, as well as the beginning and ending scenes. Let's start with twists and turns. Your expectations set the standard for what happens next in your adventure. Sometimes these expectations are tested with fate questions or expected scenes, and sometimes they are completely subverted by random events or interrupt scenes that introduce unforeseen twists and turns. Mythic's mechanics for introducing the unexpected can change the narrative of your adventure in ways you never would have guessed. Let's talk about the beginning and ending scenes. Just as the time frame of a scene is up to you, so too are its beginning and ending. A scene may start when your character physically enters an area, and end when they leave. But that's only one way of doing it. Time can just as easily mark the start and end of scenes. When a scene ends, and you are ready for the next one, come up with an expected scene for what you think that scene will be about. Coming up with an expected scene is a starting point for that scene. Mythic will tell you whether the scene starts as you expect or is changed into an altered or interrupt scene. There are a few ways to determine when to start and end a scene. Let's talk about them. You have interest. The default approach to starting and ending scenes is to focus on points of interest. Start a scene when something interesting happens and end it when the interesting event is over. There is also time or location. A jump in time or change in location is another way to mark the transition from one scene to the next. Then we have narrative shift. Instead of viewing scenes as discrete units of activity or interest, another way to view them is as a continuous stream whose transitions are marked by narrative shifts. Then we have mood. Similar to basing scenes on narrative shifts, you can also base scenes on mood shifts, ending a scene when you feel that the mood of the adventure has changed. This doesn't have to involve interest, time, place, or story changes. It's entirely based on how you feel. Aside from that, it's also important to consider the simulationist versus theatrical approach. Solo play styles can broadly be broken down into two categories: simulationist and theatrical. A simulationist player wants their adventure to emulate a virtual reality, with events proceeding in a logical fashion regardless of whether they serve a larger plot. A theatrical player, on the other hand, is more interested in treating the adventure like an ongoing story, with all the narrative structure one would expect. Both styles of play have different expectations. A simulationist player tends to prioritize surprises, while a theatrical player tends to prioritize drama and tension. Then we have the automatic interrupt. Your adventure is moving along nicely until you hit a dead end in the narrative. You have no idea where to go from here, or what the next expected scene should be. Now what? This dilemma happens in traditional guided role-playing too. Maybe the players missed some cues earlier in the adventure. Or maybe they didn't choose the route the GM expected them to take, derailing an important part of the adventure. However it happened, the players find themselves at a loss for what to do next. This is the point where a savvy game master will make something happen to get the player characters back on track. You can simulate this intervention with Mythic by choosing to make the next scene an automatic interrupt scene. Skip the roll against the chaos factor and go straight into generating a random event. This will create something new to interact with, and should be enough to get you back in the group. If you want to take it a step further, you can also skip the event focus table and make the focus an automatic move towards a thread. This guarantees that the scene will bring your player character closer to resolving an open goal, thus moving the adventure forward. And this concludes this part of the guide and review. In the next part we are going to talk about the many questions pitfall and the tension building questions. When it comes to twists, turns, beginnings and endings of scenes. This is pretty standard when comparing solo roleplay to playing with other people. But just like in a multiplayer situation, when there is a stop or lull in the sequence of events, the game master usually inserts something that feels natural or organic with the adventure. Have they lost track of that villain? Well, maybe a crime happens related to that villain. Are the player characters explorers in an expedition to find a hidden location? Maybe they encounter a non-player character or clues, guiding them to that particular location, perhaps some mysterious tracks, or a disturbed trail, perhaps sign of a struggle or blood. With the tools provided by the Mythic Game Master Emulator, you can also handle those situations in a similar way. Thank you for watching this part of the guide and review, and thank you for your likes and your comments. If you have any questions or comments, please let me know. And thank you so much to those of you that are going the extra mile to support the channel. If anyone else wishes to further support the channel, the information on how to do that will be in the description below. Once again, thank you, and see you later.